So that's another very good point, is to always be thinking at least a few steps down the road about where your next project's going to be. I was going to ask this question as my lead-off question, but I will ask it now. You've all read the book. I'm sort of curious, if I were to ask you to just pick one thing in that book that you think is most likely to result in an improved culture of stewardship in either your church or just in the church in general, is there one idea that sort of reaches out to you as being the sort of the paramount thing?
I guess maybe the notion of better planning and targeting of your Canvas campaign, if that's possible. As I said, it takes a lot of legwork and a lot of effort, but just sending out the one blanket letter to your 200 pledge units or whatever the case may be, and especially doing the express pledge kind of thing of get it over with in a hurry and be done with it, is probably not going to get you anywhere near what you could potentially raise with a little more effort.
I feel like I'm often talking in my church about I wish I could better educate the congregation to what it means to give. And so I think thinking about the whole concept of testimonials and why I give could have a huge impact, and doing it more often than just during the Canvas.
Kind of building on what Allison said, that I was most impressed in the book by that kind of new budget, talking about it in terms of the how the budget changes lives, and talking about it that way as opposed to your $100 knowing it goes towards a utility bill. It'd be nice to know, hey, $1 goes, this amount goes towards the utility bills, this goes towards this, and this much is going towards, actually changing lives. I think that's a really interesting way to look at budgets, and that you don't see that a lot, and that was very powerful to me.
Probably the most distinctive comment in the book to me was to not treat everybody equal. I had the most resistance to that idea, and but it was really critical during our capital campaign, at least, to recognize that there's the large donors, the mid donors, and the smaller it was under 5,000, 5 to 10, and then 10 and over. That's how we split it up, and to know who to approach for those amounts was really critical.
Well, this brings me to another question I've been thinking about. There's a lot of talk in the book about targeting your communications, okay?
There's a question.
So here's the question I had. So suppose you're at a point where you decide, okay, we're going to do some targeted communication, say for the annual Canvas. How would you go about defining the groups that you want to target? Would it be by giving level, by age, by length of membership? What would you say that was specifically targeted to each group? And what means of communication would you use? Would you talk to these folks? Would you, for instance, talk to some people face-to-face, some by, maybe doing a telephone canvas, some by email or just a paper mail? I'm really curious, because I have that sense that I haven't seen much of that in any churches, and heard much about targeted asking, particularly it's something as routine as the annual Canvas, as opposed to sort of, looking for a couple of angel donors to start a big capital project or something. So I'm sort of curious to know how you guys who have done this, how you go about deciding who are your various targets, and what is the message that you sort of shape for them.
I can talk a little bit about some of what we started to implement this year, and next year we'll really get to see. We got together with our minister and we selected sort of the top 10 people who needed to make a pledge that needed ministerial attention. And we asked him to deal with those people specifically, as opposed to the Canvas committee just calling and saying, you haven't made your pledge yet. And that way he could have both the pastoral component as well as the financial component. And he did that this year. And I think there are some people who would not have made their pledge if he had not called them. And I think some of them he may have met with specifically. The other thing that we did this year that I think next year may help us out is we created giving levels, which is a typical thing that other nonprofits do, but we had not done. And we actually named them and gave them society names and said how much it took to get into each one. And I feel like next year we can say to people that are almost at a level but not quite, we can target them by saying, we would like you to specifically join this level. I know one of the pieces that we fight with is we don't have a very good database. So, and of course, I'm a data person, so this is very frustrating to me because our ability to target and segment is not where I want it to be. And so I end up doing all sorts of other things to try to do that, and that's an area I wish we could improve. Are we taking questions?
Joan tells me that people are getting anxious about whether they're going to have a chance to ask questions, and the answer is yes. We wanted to pass a couple more questions down to the panel, and then I want to open it up for the audience to ask questions. Okay, I'm sorry, I should have said that at the very beginning. Well, Al, you talked about databases, you silly person, so why don't you tell us, and any of the rest of you that want to chime in, please do so, what is the importance of the database? What kind of tools do you need? What kind of information do you want to be gathering, and how do you use it? Is that enough to talk about?
Well, I can sort of start a little because this is what I do in my professional life, and one of the things I feel at our church is that the access to the data is just not there. And so I do a very sacrilegious thing. I have a shadow database, and I run the Canvas out of my shadow database. Ward sends me data, and I load it up, and then I run my Canvas out of the shadow database. And some of the things that I do have are date of membership, how much people have been pledging for the last, I think I have 6 years now, and those kinds of things, whether or not they have children, if they're a couple. I wish I had a little bit more to go on. I know that somebody asked if I could look at generational differences, and it was really my sort of saying, well, I know the people in my congregation, and I'm going to try to assign where I think they fall, and I discovered I really was uncomfortable with that, and I couldn't do that. So that's some of the data that I don't have. And then, of course, any shadow database creates a problem. It's not always current. It's really not the way to go. And I don't have an answer to that specifically because the types of things that I use in my work are hundreds of thousands of dollars and a $30,000 a year maintenance fee, and the church is not going to get into that. They don't have the same kinds of extensive data needs. So I don't have an answer to what we should be using. I just know that we're not there, and that makes it very difficult for the Canvas Committee to do its job.
We're probably, the nonprofit I work for, maybe a little bit closer to what churches may have, which is we have an Excel spreadsheet for our database. Maybe a little bit more along the lines. Yeah, I wish we had that. But
punch cards.
Yeah, right. But we look at, how much people have given and send out letters and info, Thank you for your donations in the past years. We've been able to help so many vets get into housing, recover from substance abuse, and so forth and so on. That's key. Again, we have the saying, I'm sure everyone's heard this, mission follows money and money follows mission. It's important to have that and to keep people informed on how the dollars are spent and how it relates to the mission. And I keep on harping on that, but I really think that that's a key point.
At my church and possibly in other churches as well, I really don't know if the minister or the board chair or members of the Canvas Committee know about people's wealth, or it's probably more a matter of perception. You might guess that, I think they're rich, and, they drive that Mercedes, and this and that, but, that's all perception. Many people have different circumstances and many different, ups and downs in life, and a lot of it is probably guesswork. I don't think my church even tends to ask for a certain amount from you each year. They've just started now putting out the card, like if you would give this amount your fair share, and this is your fair share, and, voluntarily inviting you to say if you're in this category or not, a fair share pledging, and do you want to be posted, as being a fair share pledger or not, and a lot of people don't want to be, even if they are. So it's a complex animal.
Yeah, I want to add something that you just said, Ron. Christopher makes the point that you should not be afraid to, if you don't know, to use sort of externals to sort of try and estimate whether people are well off or not. I mean, he says, you say you don't know. You may not know exactly, but you probably do know, if you think about it, which members of your congregation are reasonably well off, which ones are in serious financial trouble, and which ones are sort of just managing. If you stop and think about it, at least you could make a pretty good educated guess, and sometimes that's all you can do is make a good educated guess. I mean, I know what Al is saying is there's just a limit on how much data a relatively, limited organization can accumulate about its members, particularly if they're Unitarian Universalists, because we know how they feel about people accumulating data on them. I had a couple more questions, and then let's open it up to the audience. I want to know this. Do you folks think it's ever appropriate to just talk about the church's financial need as a reason to give? And if so, how do you do it without sounding like the place is mismanaged or a sinking ship?
Well, what we did, like I said, when we knew that people had moved away because of needing to find a job, that was a very specific thing that had happened, so it wasn't that anything had been mismanaged in the church. People understood that people needed to go where the money was or where they could find a job, and so it wasn't a doomsday story. It's, can you help in this situation? Then, the next year we'll be able to adjust to what's out there, what we know is out there. But what we did was we told them about the situation, and then we told them what the solution to the problem was going to be, not just throw out there for random anxiety to happen, but to say, this is what happened, this is what we want you to do, and it really worked.